Hey guys, it's Rachel. It's Thankful Thursday. My webcam is playing up, so I'm having to use the webcam, which is actually on my computer, which means that I kind of go a kind of blue colour. So I hope when I upload this kind of goes okay and stuff. This week we've been looking at compulsive overeating or binge eating disorder, sort of, the same thing. And I know that Ariel did a video yesterday which was looking at, the sort of health, psychological risks that, come with the disease. And I think Ariel articulated herself incredibly well concerning, that kind of terminology that we use, and kind of being able to say, I only know what I know, I've only experienced what I know, that in what I say I don't want to offend anyone or upset anyone. And my sort of issue, well, it's not an issue, my anxiety when I make some of these videos is that if I haven't experienced a certain aspect of it, that I somehow can distress a person, or not saying I can have that impact on somebody, but sort of say the wrong thing, and all the rest of it. So this is kind of a bit of a sort of signing of a sort of paper kind of before, and just saying that I don't want to offend anyone in what I'm saying. What I'm going to look at today specifically, and it's something I looked at last week with bulimia, are the risk factors and the things that can lend a person to develop an eating disorder, and this week specifically binge eating disorder. For me, quite often with an eating disorder, it doesn't really matter what a person has experienced. I mean, there has been research in the sense of, last week I was sort of saying that, bulimics can sometimes come from families where there's addiction, where there's maybe more chaos, and there are pieces of research which have looked at sort of the circumstances that lend a person to be anorexic, and the things that lend a person to compulsively overeat. What I'm going to do today is, I did some research on this because, I haven't struggled with sort of binge eating disorder. I haven't struggled with bulimia either, so that whole concept of kind of binging, it isn't something I'm too familiar with. But what I did do when I did some research, and I think that this is quite interesting, was kind of looking at the societal issues that can cause an eating disorder, and I kind of looked into that, and it's something that interests me greatly. And I know a lot of people are like, my eating disorder has nothing to do with, society, but of course it does. How can it not have any connection to that? Because you're a body in the world, and so you're going to be shaped by your environment, and it doesn't mean that it's a cause or it's always a trigger, but it has to be part of the bigger picture, because you can't isolate someone's experiences. You can't just say that experience is just in that person's head. Of course, the wider environment is going to have an impact on the struggles that somebody has, on their prognosis, on can they recover. And so when I was kind of looking at this, and you've probably heard of Orbach, who she wrote Fat is a Feminist Issue, and this is kind of a feminist perspective that I'm giving, but I did think it was quite interesting. And what I found here was that quite often with compulsive overeating, that it is a feminist issue, because the compulsive overeating and quite often what can cause that, not everybody, because there's people who binge who stay a normal weight, and the things that when a person becomes overweight, and like Ariel said, I don't like that term, because you're using BMI to define that, and I've got friends whose BMIs are in the overweight and they're not overweight, so I'm using that word, but I know that there's some flexibility there. Is that it's a kind of defiance against the ideal that, magazines, television, everywhere we look, we're basically told that our bodies aren't okay. We're told that we need to change ourselves, you know. God, adverts even down to advertising ladies' razors, you know, that we have to have these perfect legs that look this certain way, and we have this tan, and we have this perfect husband. And it's just, you know, there's no consistency, there's no kind of, we are beautiful. It's either magazines like Heat and stuff which are slagging women off, you know, they're taking pictures of celebrities, cellulite, or bad angles of them. And then on the other extreme we've got magazines like Vogue, which I'm a complete fashion whore, and I know that, you know, that have this ideal. And I don't know if people have seen the September issue, which is sort of behind the scenes at Vogue in the States, Anna Wintour, you know, and they had what's her name now? Oh, her name's just gone out of my head. Very famous actress, and the changes that they made to her, and to me, she's absolutely stunning. And they just changed everything about her. So we can't look at ourselves and look at that and feel comfortable with ourselves, because it's not matching an ideal. And that can quite often lend a person into an eating disorder, and specifically the research has shown into sort of binging and this cycle of binge starve, because we never feel good enough and we attack our bodies. So it's this whole like poor self-image, and in many respects some people can find feeding themselves as actually it's a comfort, but it's actually something that they give to themselves, and that goes right back to, you know, your relationship with your mother, with the feeding. And there is this comfort and this kind of security in feeding oneself and replenishing oneself. So that's kind of one angle at kind of, you know, at looking at what can lend to this. And the other is this kind of symbolic meaning of thin and fat. How thin is scary, it's the unknown, whereas fat is a safe place, it's comfortable. It means that we're hiding ourselves in the same way an anorexic may reduce her body weight to protect herself from being heavier, which is incredibly frightening. Somebody with maybe compulsive overeating, having weight on them is what makes them safe. And so it's the same thing, okay? It's two different ends of the scale, but the anorexic needs to gain the weight to be a healthy weight. The person who has been compulsive overeating and is therefore overweight, again, I don't like using that term, needs to get their body to a healthy weight, and it's this healthy place. And for me, what is key in recovery is that on both ends, whether you're gaining weight to be a healthier weight or lose, you have to do it healthily. Because what's going to happen is if you diet or restrict yourself to lose the weight, you're still in that eating disorder cycle. In the same way, if you're underweight and you binge to a healthier weight, you're still unhealthy. So whether even when your weight is healthy, you've done it in a way that isn't healthy. And that is kind of a lot of people find when recovering from an eating disorder is like, well, if being healthy weight doesn't make me happy. And it's like, well, it's not going to make you happy if you get there using an eating disorder. Okay, so there's that kind of symbolism with food, and this kind of addiction in compulsive overeating to kind of just, it's food. It's like, whereby the anorexic may be like food because they're restricting themselves. Somebody who's compulsively overeating is food because they're binging and they're in that eating disorder cycle. So that's another aspect, and I'm aware of the time here. And so yeah, that kind of can link into that whole dieting pressure, that everybody, you need to be thin to be happy, and being thin is going to make you successful, and being thin is like the most wonderful thing in the world, and it's going to solve all your problems. Well, that's a load of fucking crap, isn't it, basically? And so with that pressure to diet, you're in that same cycle whereby you might restrict yourself heavily and lose a bit of weight, and then eat to comfort yourself, or even just because of sort of biology and that starving, and it doesn't matter what your weight is there. Okay, so there's that. And then the other sort of thing that I wanted to touch on just quickly is the whole physiological hunger and not being aware of your own hunger. And you know, there are, you know, parts of the brain that control appetite, and what often happens with the person with an eating disorder is that they have no concept of what it is to be full or what hunger is, and that has to all be relearned. So that's kind of both of them. And you know, the other thing is that whole good food, bad foods, and you know, it's going to keep you in that same cycle. I'm going to go, guys, because my time's out, but I really hope that that's been of some use. Alright, bye.